Hi, Tantus Narba and Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome! It is time to continue talking about Pathfinder, the role-playing game system. We were talking about some of the environments you're going to meet while you're out adventuring, talking about them as if you need to know about them, being a GM, Game Master, or a player. Let's talk more about the dungeon, because the dungeon, of course, is where you're going to be most of the time. Today I'm going to talk about the walls, the floors, the doors, all the kind of various basic details of the dungeon and beyond. Let's talk about the walls, because it is actually important to know about the various walls. Masonry walls are probably going to be the more common ones you're going to be finding. These are piled stones which may or may not have some kind of mortar or something cementing them between each other, and they're going to be separating, building into existing areas or covering over existing walls. There could also be stone walls that are hewn from a cave wall or from a passage that's been carved from a solid block of stone into the form that it is now. There's, of course, you could also just find smooth stone walls that are representative of course, natural caves, if they aren't actual natural caves. The thing about the wall is they're going to separate corridors, they're going to separate chambers, they're going to separate various places within your dungeon. They're generally easy to climb, but very difficult to break. Now, of course, there are multiple types of stone masonry walls. Each one is a little tougher than the last. There's hewn stone walls, unhewn stone walls. You can find iron walls, wooden walls, and paper walls. You can also find walls that are magically treated to make them harder to break down or to break through. You can find walls with arrow slits in them, places that block most effect between them, but someone could shoot an arrow through it, get some good cover if they're right on the other side of it. Walls, generally speaking, are going to be very hard to damage and have a lot of hit points. You could break one down eventually. It just will take time. Let's talk about the floors you're going to be walking on, because that's actually an important one too when you think about it. Now, floors can come in a variety of ways. They can be even flagstone, just a basic thing you're walking on. They could be uneven flagstone, maybe a little difficult to walk on. They could be hewn floors, which they could just be sort of cut over, similar to the walls in a hewn dungeon, that it's a little uneven but mostly well done. It could be smooth hewn floors. That means that someone's taken the time to smooth them all the way out. You could be walking over various levels of rubble, which will interfere with how quickly you can move around a dungeon. You might have difficult terrain the more dense the rubble becomes. And of course, you could just find natural stone floors, what you'd find in a cave, the kind of just general cave-type floor. Now, of course, you can find various things as you're exploring the dungeon. You can find slippery floors, which are very much treacherous, either with water across them that's making them slippery, or ice. You can find grates that are in the floor. You can come across ledges that it might be, I have to make a ledge to step down from an area. All of these alter the way that you're moving around the dungeon. Of course, you can also find things like trapdoors, areas that lead to other doors, sliding door sort of floors so that you could have the floor slide out of the way, or even traps in the floor. Traditionally, traps or triggers of traps are often put into floors, meaning there are hazards in and of themselves in the very floor you're walking on that you're going to have to worry about. You're going to have to worry about what you're moving on because it might interfere with your movement, whether it be your acrobatics or your ability to run. Now, doors are going to be the next important thing that you're going to encounter in a dungeon. More often than not, most doors are, of course, wooden, and varieties of strength in wooden doors exist. But there are also iron doors, and there are also stone doors that you can find. Every door can be broken down. You could use brute force to break it open. You could, of course, just try to damage it and break it down, and the door can be very hard and tough, and that can take a lot of time, but you can. Just like you could theoretically break down a wall given enough time and effort, you could do the same with a door. Of course, it might be easier just to break open the door rather than break it down, and that depends on your GM determining what kind of DC it is, depending on how things are set up, how if you just want to use strength just to break open the door rather than break down the door, what it would be. It can vary which one would be more or less difficult. Doors will oftentimes, though, have locks. Locks can be something like a padlock that's placed on the outside of it, or it could be something built into the door. It can also be associated with bars of wood or iron being placed in a direction to keep it from being opened up. Of course, character with disabled device can attempt to break through locks, and various locks have various difficulty depending on how powerful they are. You could always break a lock itself too if you really wanted to. It's a way of getting around it. It's more effective if it's one that's external rather than internal. And there are other varying forms of locks. There could be combination locks. There could be locks that require special keys or special types of keys. So that means disabling it might not even work ever. It could be impossible with the tools that you're provided with. A door might also be stuck, barred, or magically sealed in some kind of way. And each of them has their own difficulties for breaking them down. If the hinges of a door are accessible, you could either try to break those also, which would have their own rules for breaking them and their own difficulties, or disable them, which may or may not be more easier to disable than the locks themselves. So there could be an alternate way of attempting to break through a door. Now, there are varieties of other types of doors. There are more things like secret doors, magical doors. Each of these, when you encounter them, it would be a different sort of thing encountering them. Secret door, of course, you're discovering it. Magic door might have some kind of enchantment or spell based around its very existence. There's things like portcullises, which are more barrier than door. You can see through it very well, but it's there blocking your way. Now, traditionally, when we're talking about doors, they do block detection magic. Like walls of stone, iron doors, they block detection magic. Wooden doors, wooden walls, and stone doors don't block detection magic. So there could be a way that you can use detection magic, like things like detect thoughts or detect evil, to detect people on the other side of certain walls and doors. It does come up. Now, the last thing I want to mention is stairs. Stairs traditionally do not bother with your movement. They are existing. They travel between floors of various dungeons. You can't run on a stair, but your movement's unhindered. You could just use them as you use anything else, except for the running part. There are times when the stairs can be very steep, and it might hinder your ability to move, making it more difficult terrain. And even the normal stairs, the non-difficult terrain versions of them, they hamper acrobatics, so it's not really good to tumble around on top of stairs. Let's talk about an important hazard when it comes to exploring a dungeon: the cave-in. This is when portion of the roof or a portion of the cave or portion of the dungeon collapses down. This can either be a direct hazard, collapsing down on top of you, or indirect, that let's say something collapses behind you and blocks it off. Traditionally, you're going to use either knowledge engineering or craft stone cutting to sort of notice if you're approaching an area that has a weakened structural integrity. It would be DC 20 on either of these to notice it. Otherwise, you're just passing through it. Now, when that area takes damage or a concussive blast hits it, that's when it would collapse. Otherwise, normally it's okay for you to pass through it. A collapsing area traditionally has a 15-foot radius of that is a bury zone, and a 10-foot farther radius called a slide zone. Bury zone means you're straight on top of it. Slide zone means it's the area out to the sides that the rubble is sliding from. Regardless of which one you're in, it will be a DC 15 reflex save to try to get out of the way of it a little bit. In the case of you're in the bury zone, you'll be taking 8d6 points of damage. You'll be buried regardless if you make your save or not, but if you make your save, you take half of it. Failure means you're buried. You've taken the full damage. Success means you're buried. You take half damage. In the slide zone, it does only 3d6 points of damage. It's the exact same DC. Reflex avoids the damage. You're not buried. Failure means you're buried. You take that damage. So even in the slide zone, you possibly still bury. Now, once you are buried, you will take 1d6 points of non-lethal damage each minute you are buried. Each minute that you are within that slide area or that burial zone. You can get out yourself with a strength check, but it's a pretty high DC, DC 25. But consider this: every 5x5x5 cube is about a ton. If my friend wants to try to get me out, because it's pretty difficult for me to escape on my own from this burial, they have to dig out, and they can move approximately 5 times their heavy load in 1 minute. So that's pretty good progress that they can get. If they had some kind of proper tools, like shovels or pickaxes or something, it's twice that amount. So it's not saying that your friend couldn't get you out of being buried in there in a timely, not getting killed manner. It's just, it's not always a given, depending on how well you're buried into it in comparison to them. So that's it for today. I talked about dungeons. I, of course, talked about the walls, the floors, the doors, the locks, all about that dungeon. Even the stairs a little bit. All these things that are the basic building blocks of a dungeon that you're going to encounter along your way. I then moved into start talking about some of the hazards with the collapse, the cave-in. The stuff falls on your head and tries to crush you. In the next episode, I'm going to talk about a few more hazards and move into talking about the biggest of all hazards, traps. which you're going to usually encounter, and they are going to be mean to you. But regardless, if you have any questions, comments, anything you say, anything you think I left out, please leave in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe to support the channel, the Empire, the work I do. If you want to show some more support, check out my Patreon, linked in the description below. But until the next time, I bid you farewell.